Hello everyone, this is Susanna from Hold It Right There Sewing Patterns. Welcome back to my video tutorial series for the Meridian Sling. To make the Meridian Sling, please purchase the sewing pattern available on my website linked below. In this video, I will walk through the steps for making the adjustable strap and lining. Grab your pattern instructions and follow along with me now, beginning on page 7, step 23. Locate Dring Tab F. Place wrong side up. Draw a line across the center from the short side to the short side. Fold in and press the long raw edges to meet the center marking. Top stitch 1/8 inch from both long edges. Measure and mark a 1/2 inch from the top right and the top left edges. Cut diagonally from the bottom corner to the 1/2 inch marking on both sides. Insert the D-ring tab through the D-ring. Fold the D-ring tab in half, matching the raw edges. Pin or clip the raw edges. If you wish, install a rivet approximately 1/4 inch below the D-ring for extra durability. Before we move on to the next step, I want to note that the D-ring tab can be placed on the left or the right side of the exterior back, and this really depends on which side you prefer when wearing your sling. For the option to wear the Meridian Sling on either side, add a second D-ring tab to the opposite side of the exterior back, just as Jacqueline did on her Meridian Sling. Locate exterior back C. Place right side up. Measure and mark 1 inch from the right bottom edge of C. Pin or clip the longer bottom corner edge of the D-ring tab where marked. The D-ring should be angled toward the upper left corner as shown. Sew using an 1/8 inch seam allowance, then set aside the exterior back panel C for now. You will now need strap tab E. Fold over and press the bottom narrow edge 1/2 inch. Repeat with the second strap tab. Right sides together, pin or clip the E pieces on the long sides. Sew the side edges using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Turn right side out through the wide top opening and press. Draw a center mark at the top wide edge of E. Draw this center marking on the outward facing side of your strap tab. So in other words, the piece that you want to have seen from the exterior of your bag. Insert the stabilizer through the wide top opening and push it toward the bottom until there is about 1/2 inch of a gap at the top edge without the stabilizer. And this will help to keep the stabilizer out of the seam allowances in the bag later. Locate your webbing, slide, and swivel hook. To prevent fraying, apply liquid fabric sealant to both ends of the webbing. Allow to dry before moving on to the next step. Pass one end of the webbing through the right side of the slide, over the center bar of the slide, and then through the left side of the slide. Turn wrong side up. Fold the raw edge over about 1 inch. Then fold over 1 inch of the webbing a second time. Leave enough space so that your slide hardware will not interfere with your presser foot when you're sewing. Clip in place. In the next step, we will sew a square with an X in the center through all the layers of the webbing to hold it in place. We're going to begin by backstitching a couple of times, and then we will sew a square of stitches through all layers of the webbing to secure. To form the square of stitches, I keep my needle down when I reach the corner, lift my presser foot, pivot, and then resume sewing until the next corner. Sew the rest of the sides of the square in the same way. I've sped up the video just for the sake of time. I actually sew this step really slowly and use my hand wheel quite a bit. I'm sewing the last line of stitching of the square, and I'm going to reach the starting point where I began. Now I will pivot and sew diagonally from that corner of the square to the opposite corner. Keep the needle down, pivot, and then sew back over the straight edge of the square to the next corner. With the needle down, pivot and sew diagonally to the opposite corner, forming an X. Backstitch to reinforce. And here is how the X looks like on the webbing. Insert the remaining end of the strap into the swivel hook. And in this video, I inserted it incorrectly. So you want to have the swivel hook part facing the outside of the strap. But in any case, you will pass the end of the strap through the slide, first through the right side, then through the left side, and then you can use the slide to adjust it. You'll see in a moment that my swivel hook is kind of inside out. It's not a big deal. You can just easily flip it. So if this happens, you just want to turn the swivel hook around so that the hook part is facing the outside of the strap. All right, we are ready now to insert the end of the webbing into the narrow end of the strap tab. And you want to push the end of the webbing until it is about 1 inch from the wide top raw edge. Top stitch 1/8 inch from the sides and the bottom edge of the strap tab. To keep the webbing centered, I like to use just a little bit of double-sided tape on the webbing so it doesn't shift as I'm top stitching. After top stitching, for additional security, add a rivet to the center of the strap tab through all layers if you prefer. Locate exterior back C and place right side up. Match the center marking on the strap tab with the center marking at the top edge of C. Pin or clip. Sew using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You will now need the loop H piece. Place wrong side up. Draw a line across the center from short side to short side, or just simply fold it in half, matching long sides together as I am. Then press to form a center crease. Next, fold in and press the long raw sides to meet either the center marking, if you've drawn it, or the center crease as I am. Fold in half again, matching the long folded sides. Press as needed. Next, top stitch 1/8 inch from both long sides. Okay, we will now need exterior back C. Place the short raw edges of the loop that you just made on either side of the center marking at the top raw edge of strap tab E. Then pin or clip the loop in place. Using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, stitch the loop to the panel. Set aside exterior back C for now. We will now begin work on the lining. Locate card pockets I and pin or clip them right sides together. Using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, sew around the edges. Leave a 3 inch opening at the bottom edge for turning. Trim the corner seam allowances and then turn right side out through the opening. Fold in and press the bottom opening so that it is even with the seam allowance. Top stitch 1/8 inch from the top edge. Use a fabric pen to draw a center line on the fabric 1 or outward facing side of the card slots. This will be our stitching line for dividing the card slots in half. Locate the J3 lining pocket pieces. Set one piece aside. Place the remaining piece right side up and fold it in half wrong sides together, matching the side edges. Mark the right side top center with a fabric pen where creased. 1.5 inches from the top edge, mark the left and right sides. These 1.5 inch markings are the placement for our card slots in the next step. Use this marked piece for step 37. Center the prepared card slots 1.5 inches from the top edge of the marked J1 piece. Then pin the card slots in place. Use an 1/8 inch seam allowance to sew along the bottom and side edges of the card slots. Sew along the center marked line to divide the card slots in half. Be sure to backstitch at the beginning and end to reinforce. You will now need the other J3 piece. Right sides together, pin or clip the lining pocket J3 pieces together. Using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, sew around the edges. Leave about a 3 inch opening at the bottom for turning. Trim the corner seam allowances. Turn the lining pocket right side out through the opening. Gently push out the corners. It helps to use a blunt pair of scissors to gently push out the corners, or something like a chopstick or letter opener with a blunt point that won't push through the stitching. Just as we did with the card slots, fold and press the bottom opening so that it is even with the seam allowance. Top stitch 1/8 inch from the top edge. You will now need your lining C pieces. On the right side of both, mark the top and the bottom centers just as we did previously. Refer to step 3 for how to mark the centers. Place one lining C piece aside. This will be the lining front. On the remaining C piece, measure and mark the left and right sides 3.5 inches from the top edge. This piece that we are marking will be the lining back. The markings we're making 3.5 inches below the top edge are for the placement of the lining pocket. Place the prepared lining pocket on the lining back centered 3.5 inches below the top edge where marked. Then pin the lining pocket in place. Use a 1/8 inch seam allowance to sew along the sides and bottom edges of the lining pocket. This lining back panel will be joined to the exterior back panel in the next step. Locate exterior back C. It is helpful to fold the webbing out of the way for the next steps. Use a rubber band or a piece of string to secure the webbing and keep it out of the way of your stitching. Wrong sides together, pin or clip the lining back to the exterior back. Baste the layers together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, then set aside this panel for now. You will now need the exterior front panel and the lining front C. Just as we did in the previous step, pin or clip the lining front wrong sides together with the exterior front. Baste the layers together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, then set aside this front panel for now. Our front and back panels are now prepared, and this concludes video 4 in the Meridian Sling series. Join me in video 5, the final video in this series, as we finish making our Meridian Sling, making the gussets and binding. Thanks for watching. Happy sewing!